All right, let's dive into something pretty chilling today. The legend of the world evil feast. Centuries of whispers, but never really talked about openly. You sent me some sources, though, and I got to say, they're intriguing.
Yeah, it's a legend that is definitely shrouded in mystery. A lot of people dismiss it, just folklore. But I find it really fascinating because it kind of gets at some of our deepest fears about power and corruption and, those hidden forces that might be shaping our world.
Okay, so let's unpack this. What exactly is the World Evil Feast? For those who are hearing about this, for the first time.
We need ice for this hot podcast. Saddle sink.
So, picture this. A really remote mountain range, shrouded in mist, battered by the weather, harsh weather. And it's in this really desolate and forbidding landscape that the feast is said to take place, under cover of darkness and secrecy.
Okay, so we have our setting, practically begging for a horror movie. But who are the guests at this sinister gathering?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The legend says you have a very mixed group of attendees. You have powerful humans, politicians, business tycoons, influential figures, the kind of people who are driven by ambition and a lust for control. But they're not alone.
Oh, there's more. Sounds like we're about to take a turn, a supernatural turn.
Exactly. Because the legend also says that these individuals are joined by beings of a more otherworldly nature. We're talking about demons, wraiths, and creatures that really defy easy description. It's a real fusion of human evil and supernatural forces, all coming together on this isolated mountaintop.
Okay, I'm officially intrigued, but also a little creeped out. What's the purpose of this whole thing? What's on the agenda at the World Evil Feast?
Well, the legend suggests that the feast is not just a party, It's strategic. The attendees are said to be using it to forge sinister plans, orchestrating events to destabilize and ultimately control humanity. We're talking wars, economic collapses, pandemics, all manipulated from the shadows by this powerful cabal.
This is starting to feel a lot less like a myth and more like, a blueprint for a conspiracy thriller.
Right. I think that's part of its allure. It taps into anxieties about, hidden agendas, the possibility that events that seem random are actually orchestrated by forces we just don't understand.
Speaking of hidden agendas, the setting itself, the mountains, it's significant, right? It's not just a random location.
Yeah, you're right to point that out. Mountains hold symbolic weight. In a lot of cultures, they're often seen as places of power, where the veil between our world and the supernatural world is thin. Think of Mount Olympus in Greek mythology, or Mount Sinai in the Bible.
So the mountains represent not just isolation, but also a connection to something beyond the ordinary. And almost like these individuals are trying to tap into a source of power that is both hidden and dangerous.
Exactly. The mountains really reinforce this idea that those attending the feast believe they are above the rest of humanity, literally and figuratively. They're trying to control the world from a position of isolation and superiority. Perceived superiority.
It's fascinating how the setting itself really reinforces those themes.
Yeah.
The ambition, the power, the potential for corruption, almost like the mountains themselves are watching, bearing silent witness to the dark dealings.
And that brings us to another crucial part of the legend, the shadowy figure who seems to be the orchestrator of this whole thing, the devil himself.
The devil. Add a whole other layer of intrigue and terror to this story. But is he explicitly present, or is it more of a behind-the-scenes influence?
It's a great question. The legend is a bit ambiguous on that point. His presence is more felt than seen. It's like he's a puppet master, manipulating events, whispering temptations to those who are susceptible.
The classic Faustian bargain.
Right.
The promise of power and influence.
Yeah.
In exchange for one's soul.
Exactly. And the legend underscores that these bargains are dangerous. That allure of power can be really intoxicating, blinding people to the true cost of what they want.
It makes you wonder if there are real-world examples of individuals who have fallen for that temptation, who have sacrificed their morals for, a taste of power. I think we've all met people like that, right? People who will do anything to get ahead.
Absolutely. History is full of those examples. People compromising their values, sometimes committing horrific acts, just to gain power and control. And the legend taps into that very real fear, the fear of losing ourselves, something that ultimately destroys us.
It's a chilling thought. It also raises a question, though. If the World Evil Feast is this gathering of corrupt individuals who want to manipulate the world, does the legend offer any hope for the rest of us? Like, is there a counterforce to this darkness?
And that's what I think makes the legend so compelling. Because it's not all doom and gloom. It also acknowledges the resilience of humanity. Despite all of these machinations, despite the power of those at the feast, the legend suggests that time and again, ordinary people rise up, they challenge the evil, they thwart the plans, they keep hope alive.
So even in the face of overwhelming darkness, there's a flicker of light, a suggestion that good can win.
Exactly. It's that flicker of hope that makes this legend so enduring. It's a reminder that even when things are at their darkest, we have the capacity to resist, to fight back, to make a difference. It's that resistance, that spark of defiance that makes it more than just like a horror story. It really speaks to something deep within us, don't you think?
Absolutely, yeah. We've all felt that frustration. You know, when you come up against these systems or individuals who just seem to operate with total impunity. But the legend says that even those elaborate schemes hatched in the most secretive of places, they can be disrupted.
Right. It's a reminder that no matter how entrenched power seems, it's never absolute. The World Evil Feast might be for the elite, but the legend says their control, their plans, they can be foiled.
And who better to disrupt those plans than ordinary people? The people who aren't blinded by ambition or seduced by power. There's something just inherently satisfying about that, about the underdog rising up, challenging those who think they're untouchable.
It's a total David and Goliath scenario, right? But with global stakes. And that element of hope, that possibility of resistance, that's what I think people find so compelling about this.
The feast itself doesn't just poof disappear, does it? It seems to suggest it's been going on for centuries, so evil is like persistent, a persistent force.
You've hit on a key point there. It acknowledges that despite any setbacks, the feast keeps going. It's a reminder. Evil isn't eradicated easily, it adapts, evolves, and then re-emerges in new forms, insidious forms.
So it's a cautionary tale. A reminder to never let your guard down, to always be on the lookout for those who are trying to control us, manipulate us for their own gain.
Precisely. It's a warning against complacency, about the dangers of letting people who are power-hungry just operate unchecked. It symbolizes, in a way, that potential for corruption and the need to always be vigilant against those who would exploit and abuse their power.
I'm seeing a connection here to some very real anxieties we have about the world. We see it every day. Corruption, greed, power grabs in politics, business, even our personal lives.
You're absolutely right. And while the World Evil Feast is made up, it plays on these real fears and anxieties about being human. It's a story that has stayed with us for centuries because it reflects things about us and the world we live in, things we don't always want to admit.
So is that what makes these dark stories so captivating? Are we drawn to these stories about evil feasts and secret gatherings that want to destroy humanity because it lets us face our fears safely?
There's a psychological element, I think. It's a controlled dose of fear. A way to look at that darker side of human nature without actually having to experience it. It lets us think about the consequences of unchecked ambition, the fragility of civilization, but in a safe space.
Like reading a horror novel.
Yeah.
Or watching a scary movie. You get that rush, the thrill of fear. But you know it's not real.
Exactly. And that distance, that separation from reality allows us to process those emotions, those anxieties, but in a way that feels manageable. Maybe it's a form of catharsis.
But these stories, they're not just out there on their own. They're shaped by cultural values, fears. The way we tell and interpret these stories says something about us, about our anxieties, right? How we understand good and evil.
That's so important. These narratives, passed down over generations, they become cultural touchstones. They make us think about our values, the choices we make as individuals when facing power and temptation. The World Evil Feast, with its themes of corruption and ambition, that struggle between good and evil, it's a cautionary tale about unchecked power and holding those in authority accountable.
It's a shared narrative, right?
Yeah.
It helps us make sense of the world, a way to talk about our fears, about those who abuse their power, and what might happen.
Exactly. It's a story that goes beyond just one person's experience. It speaks to those bigger concerns, the nature of power, corruption, how important it is to safeguard everyone's well-being.
So we've talked about a lot, the setting, who goes to this thing, the agenda, how persistent evil is, and that little glimmer of hope in all the darkness, but there's still more to unpack.
You're right. We've just talked about it broadly, but now I think we need to zoom in. Look at the specifics, the details that make it so compelling and so unsettling.
All right, I'm all ears. What kind of details are we talking about here?
Let's think more about the mountains. What is it about mountains that makes them such a powerful symbol for isolation, danger, the supernatural? Why are they so often the backdrop for these stories about power and hidden agendas?
And we can't forget the guests themselves. I mean, we know it's powerful humans and these otherworldly entities, but what can we learn from the specific people and creatures who show up? What do they represent? What are the motivations?
And maybe most importantly, what about the rituals, the ceremonies? What are they trying to achieve with these things? What kind of power are they invoking? And what does it tell us about them, their beliefs, their desires?
Now we're getting to the good stuff. Can't wait to unpack this all, see what other secrets we can uncover.
Me too. Let's just take a second to gather our thoughts. And when we come back, we'll go right to the heart of the feast, explore the rituals, the symbolism, the things that make it so chilling and enduring.
All right, we're back, ready to really get into the shadowy heart of this world evil feast. Before the break, we were talking about some of the specifics, some of the really eerie details of this whole legend.
Yeah, let's move from those big ideas to the details, the little things that make this legend so unsettling. We're talking about the mountains and why mountains are so powerful in our minds, especially in stories about power and the supernatural.
Yeah, it's not just this one legend. Think about Mount Olympus. Home of the Greek gods, or even like Mordor from Lord of the Rings, that volcanic wasteland where, all the evil stuff is. Mountains are majestic, but also kind of dangerous.
Right, exactly. They're a challenge, a place where you have to climb, where the normal rules of the world don't really apply. In a lot of cultures, they're seen as the place where heaven and earth meet, where the line between the physical world and the spirit world is the thinnest.
So in this legend, the mountains aren't just background, right? They're almost like a character. They add to the mystery and to the idea that something really dark is happening there.
Exactly. The mountains are isolating. Whatever happens up there, it's away from everyone else. It's a place where people who want power can operate in secret, away from the rest of the world.
Okay, so we've climbed the mountain. I'm picturing this gathering in some huge hall inside the mountain. Torches are flickering, casting shadows, and gathered around a big black table are the attendees. But who are these people? We know they're powerful, and some are otherworldly. But what makes them tick?
Well, the legend gives us some clues about the specific people who go to the feast. And their motivations, they're all different, Imagine a politician, ruthless, uses his charm to hide his ambition, makes promises he won't keep.
Oh yeah, I've met a few of those. Always working an angle, always wanting more power.
Exactly. And then you have the tycoon. The business person, they manipulate markets. Their wealth is built on other people's backs. They see the world as a game to be won, and they don't care about the cost.
And don't forget those who, they have a different kind of influence. They control the stories we hear. They control information. The influencers, right? Every word is designed to create chaos or to push a hidden agenda.
Yeah, you're really painting a picture here. And it shows that the people at the feast, they aren't just, villains in a movie. They're complex, often charismatic. They represent that dark side of ambition, that pull that power has.
But it's not just humans at this table, right? There are some really unsettling guests, the supernatural ones.
Right, the otherworldly attendees. We're talking demons with horns, eyes that burn with ancient evil. And then wraiths, shadowy, hard to see, but you feel them. They whisper about ancient horrors.
Okay, I am getting chills. What about the creatures that you can't even describe, the ones that just feel wrong?
The legend doesn't go into much detail there. It just hints at these beings that warp reality. Their forms are disturbing. You can't understand their motives. It's like the legend is saying, there are things out there in the universe that we just can't comprehend.
This is like a nightmare. Human ambition mixed with supernatural dread. But what about the feast itself? What actually happens?
The legend says there are dark rituals, ceremonies. They're meant to call on ancient powers and to bind the attendees together. They offer sacrifices, make deals that give them power in the human world.
So it's not just a social event. They're actually doing work, right? Yeah. Planning out how to be evil.
Exactly. They're plotting wars and famines. They're rigging markets. They're trying to create chaos and division. Their goal, to enslave humanity, to make people do what they want.
Any rituals that stand out? Anything that tells us about their methods?
They drink this black liquid. It's thick, viscous. People say it gives them power and makes them live longer. But it tastes bitter, intoxicating, like a symbol of how power corrupts.
It's like a twisted communion. bringing them together in their darkness.
There are also rumors of blood sacrifices, innocent lives offered up to these ancient beings, and the chanting. Oh, the chanting. The legend says it's haunting, guttural. They call on names that shouldn't be spoken.
Okay, this is definitely nightmare fuel. But is there any hope here? Does the legend say anything about how to break this cycle of evil?
That's the thing. It doesn't hide how awful humans can be, or how much power evil can have. But it also reminds us that even when it's darkest, the human spirit is strong. There are always people who resist, who fight for good, even when it seems impossible.
It's not just about despair, it's also about hope, about good winning out in the end.
Yes, it's a warning, of course, but it's also a call to action. It tells us to be aware, to question those in charge, and to never give up hope, even in the dark. It's a reminder that the real power to change the world, it doesn't belong to those who hide in the shadows. It belongs to those who fight for a better future.
This has been fascinating.
Yeah.
And yet, a little unsettling. The legend of the World Evil Feast we've gone through, the symbolism, who attends, the rituals, the agenda, and that message of hope, that's at its core.
It's a legend that still speaks to us because it's about something we all understand. Our ability to be good and to be evil, our desire for power, and our desire for a world where good things win out, justice and compassion.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it made you curious, and that you'll think about how powerful these stories are and what they teach us.
We need ice for this hot podcast. Stand or sink.